Some of you have probably heard this story before. It goes something along these lines. There's this old fellow living up in the hills, and he's not lived a saintly life, one might say, but he's approaching his end. And he calls his wife to his side, and she's weeping, and he says, "Sarah, I want you to go to the fireplace and take out the third stone from the top." And when she did, she reached in and she brought to him what she had found, and it was a large mason jar full of cash. And he said, "Sarah, when I'm gone, I'm going to take all that money with me, and I want you to put that jar in the attic by the window. I'll get it on my way to heaven." Later that night, he died, and after the funeral, his wife remembered the mason jar and went to the attic, and there the jar was still full of money. And she said, "Oh no, I knew I should have put it in the basement." I know the story is an old one, and most still find it a little funny, a little humorous. But my question to you is this: why do we find it humorous? Why do we find stories like that and little quips and little sayings and little jokes like that funny? One, I think we often find or try to find the humor in things that make us feel uncomfortable. It makes it a little more palatable to us. Two, I also think we make light of things sometimes which we find repulsive, and people find hell repulsive. And I'm not telling you can't find humor in things that are controversial or disturbing sometimes, but I am telling you that as followers of Christ, hell isn't a joke or something to be taken lightly. And there are times when we need to talk about hell. Most Christians want to talk about the love of God and the beautiful things of God, and that's true, we should. We do need to focus on the good of God, but we also need to talk about the ugly things sometimes. A few years ago, I read a book by Rob Bell. Some of you may have read the book, Love Wins. And I felt like I needed to read that book because people were asking questions at the church where we were at. On Tuesday mornings, I normally had breakfast with another pastor, and there was a gentleman in the restaurant where we would normally eat that just loved the book. He loved the teachings of Rob Bell. And he was a member of another church, and so he would often enter into these conversations. And so I thought, I better read that book. I don't want to give Rob Bell any money, but I'm going to do so because I need to be well versed. And if I have church members that are asking these questions and reading these types of books, then I need to be able to say, yeah, I've read it. Well, I did, and Rob Bell, in his book, talked about his view of heaven and hell, and that love always wins. And he said he wasn't teaching or preaching universalism, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But he really was. He still came to the same conclusion. And so at that time when I was reading that book, and I went back and I did some more study on hell, and I wanted to know what other people thought. And so I read blogs, I asked questions, and even today when I hear people talk about the topic of hell, nothing much has changed. This book came out, I think, in 2011. And so here several years later, the idea is still pretty much the same. Oftentimes, what I find Christians and non-Christians will take their ideas, their thoughts about heaven and hell, and they will kind of blend things together. And they'll piecemeal it, if you will. They'll come up with things that they can live with, things that they can accept, and things that they cannot, they discard. We do that a lot with other things in life too. It just seems to me, then as now, that most everyone wants to go to heaven. No one wants to go to hell. And so what do most people do with the concept of hell or the idea of hell? They dismiss it. Many of these folks will tell you that they believe in a literal heaven, but they don't believe in a literal hell. Barna did some research several years ago, and this is what they found. that 38% of the American population says that they have confessed their sins and accepted Christ as Savior. I don't know if that's a high number or not, or a low number, but 38%, a third of the American population, a little more, that seems pretty significant. But 99% of the people that they interview claim that even though they haven't, this includes those that have and those who haven't accepted Christ or made a profession of faith, 99% said that they believe that they will not go to hell when they die, but they'll go to heaven. A majority of Americans, this is what Barna says, a majority of Americans do not believe that Satan exists, and most adults are leery about the existence of hell. And so, is it a real place? Is Satan real? Is hell real? Or is it just that heaven is real and hell is just some idea that kind of scares us? I used to tell people I didn't preach a lot on hell, but when I did, that I hoped it scared the hell out of them. And I still hope it does.